Hello, welcome back to How to RV. I am Jason, and today I want to talk about the fact that I got everything installed that we've been previously making videos about concerning the lithium battery by Enduro Power, the inverter, and the solar system, and everything else that goes along with it. So I'm going to take you through the components here and how it looks and set up inside of my RV. Now before I get too far into the video, I'm going to do something new, and that is that I'm going to do shout outs at the end of the video based off of the comments that you have left on a previous video. The reason that I want to do that is because in the last few videos when we started talking about doing this install, y'all gave some really good information and I want to start sharing that. So we're going to start doing that from this video on. Also, this video is sponsored by Enduro Power. As I said in the previous video, Enduro Power and myself worked together to build out a system. So they supplied a 200 amp hour lithium battery, and together we worked on a system that we could build out for my RV. Now the whole premise behind this build is to be able to show you something that you could put in your RV, and it's installed in a way that if you ever decided to sell your RV and want to take the system with you, then you could easily remove it and install it in your next rig. Alright, as you can see here is the Renogy 2000 watt inverter. On the face of the inverter you can see where there are some outlets, and pointing right here is where the leads go to the outside of the RV where we would plug the RV into itself to run the 110 volt side, or the side where you would run like you would if you were at your house or you were at the campground and plugged up to shore power. Now since we're talking about the shore power side, if you follow the cable around, you'll see it right here is the orange one. It actually follows out and goes out underneath and goes to a box where I could plug my camper into. So as you can see right here, if I open up the box, you can see the plug on the inside, and for my camper, since it's a 30 amp RV, you can see where the plug looks similar to one that you would find at a campground post. Now on the other side of the inverter, this is where the battery power comes in. So if you look right here, you can see the positive side, or the red wire. This is where the battery ends up. So coming off the positive terminal of the battery, it leads through a few things that we'll talk about in just a second, but it ends up right here at the inverter on the positive side. From the inverter, the red wire goes to a distribution block. Not only can I hook up the inverter from the battery, I can also hook up other things on that same strip. From there, the distribution block goes to a 250 amp fuse. I want to make sure that I keep the system protected as well as any of the wires. So if things start to go bad on me and the wires start to go hot or anything like that, then the fuse will blow and in a sense turn the system off and protect itself. And then from there, it goes to a battery cutoff switch. It's there to turn the battery off from the system and in a sense disconnecting the battery from the whole thing. And that means that when the whole system is down, not running, not being used, then little things that are pulling on the battery, I can turn the switch off and keep any of that from happening. That way the battery stays charged. Now starting back at the inverter, you see the negative side, or the black wire, and it goes from the inverter to another distribution block. This time the distribution block is the negative side, and just as the same as we were talking about for the positive side, the negative side also has other terminals where I can hook up other things on the negative side. And then from the negative terminal block, it goes to a shunt. Now we'll come back in just a minute, talk about what the shunt is, but if you follow the shunt and go from there all the way down, then the negative side there goes all the way back around to the battery. Now this completes the loop for the battery to power up the inverter and then the inverter to give us shore power. But how do we get the battery to charge, and how do we get the solar to hook up? Now if you look at the negative terminal block, you'll see two other wires going in. The next to biggest wire coming into the terminal block is the one coming from the charger that is part of the camper itself. Now if you watched the last video where we put the converter in so that we had something that could charge lithium batteries, this is the wire coming from that. But then the smallest of the three black wires, or the negative side, is the one coming from the solar panels on the outside of the RV. With that being said, we have a plug on the front of the RV where we can hook up our two portable solar panels. Now you may have noticed that on the positive side there wasn't any of those extra wires that are coming from the converter and from the solar panel, and the reason for that is because I have both of those directly connected to the battery on the positive side. Now the reason that I did that is because if I turn the battery disconnect off, then I want the battery to still charge. So coming from the camper itself or from the solar panels, it's still charging. So what that red wire is for is to actually power up the shunt, because the shunt is running from a negative to negative. So there has to be some power in there to turn on the electronics inside. And what the shunt is for is allow me to be able to see how much battery life I have. It also tells me how much I'm consuming of the battery as well as how much I'm charging back into it. So on the shunt where the battery is feeding it in to power it up, there is another cable that goes off and goes into the compartment where the battery is. And what that cable is for is it runs around and goes to a display that I can look at to see what the shunt is telling me. Now in my case, I didn't put the display somewhere where I could see it, and the reason for that is because this shunt is Bluetooth and it needs a display in order to send the signal out. As you can see right here, this is what the display looks like when I pull it up on my phone to see what the system is doing. For the location of where I installed the lithium battery by Endura Power, I put that in a small compartment right beside my water heater. By doing that, that allowed me some more space in order to put everything else under my bed. And because of putting the battery in that location, I was able to mount everything else on the floor and encase it so that I didn't take up as much space under my bed. So I've already had the system powered up a couple of times and done some tests. We'll make some more videos about that. But before we wrap up, I want to get into the comments from the last video. One of the comments was from Brandon Ottenhoff, and he said, "I'm sure you will cover the other charging issue in another video, but just as a reminder, when you are towing your trailer, you are hooked up to your 12-volt power from your tow vehicle. Tow vehicles do not normally have lithium batteries, and alternators in vehicles are not designed to charge lithium batteries. And having AGM or lead acid batteries hooked up together with lithium is not good. Installing a proper DC to DC charger with a battery isolator is a good idea." So Brandon, you are absolutely right. And because of that, I went underneath my RV and looked around, and I already have a battery isolator that came with my RV so that none of that back charging happens. But from your comment, I'll make sure that I'm not getting any back charges from the vehicle just in case. Another comment was from Places on the List, where they were actually talking about 2 videos back, and they stated, "As I said last week, if you feed the inverter back to the main panel, you have to turn the converter circuit breaker off before you turn on the inverter. That's why I did a transfer switch. But for you, if you want to be able to remove the upgrades, then your way will make it easier." Now, you're absolutely right. I could have put in a transfer switch, and I was kind of working off a budget, but nevertheless, I could have put in a transfer switch. That way, if I lost shore power to the RV, then the inverter would kick in and power everything instead. And I've actually had a few others comment the same thing, but you're absolutely right. If I want to use this system, then I got to turn the converter off so that the inverter's not powering the RV, which is powering the charger, which is charging the battery, which is running the inverter. Yeah, it's a crazy little loop, but you're absolutely right. With this system, then I have to make sure I do that. So that just about does it. So enjoy your RV, enjoy your lithium batteries, and God bless.